FICO gets tunnel vision. If this tube represented payment history, which payment history represents 40 to 45% of the lender scores, the FICO Classic scores that we focus on. Why do we focus on that? Because that's what 90% of the lenders use and 100% of your mortgage lenders use. If the front of that tube represents right now and the end of that tube represents 7 years ago, FICO is supposed to line that derogatory or that credit up in chronological order. Right? At least it's supposed to. Now remember, everything I'm telling you, when FICO was designed, it was designed to emulate real statistics. Statistics that they took off of thousands and thousands of different loans. Statistics that determined how well a client would pay this future potential loan and what's that risk level. All represented by a 3-digit number. So important. FICO Classic, as we talked about, is a 21-year-old algorithm, and it doesn't necessarily do what it was designed to do anymore. But here's what it's supposed to do. Again, lines the derogatory up or your credit up in chronological order. Anything that's over 2 years old and newer makes up to 75% of the history part of the score. Again, almost half. Anything that is 1 year old and newer makes up to 75% of that 75%. In other words, progressively more impact the newer the derogatory is. Which means this, anything over 2 years old and newer makes up to 25% and less than half of the overall credit score. So important. Such a huge part of the overall credit score, it's hard to imagine that FICO getting the biggest part of the score wrong, which would be aging the derogatory correctly. Which this is exactly what happens with the FICO Classic scores or the lender scores. For example, you could have an old derogatory or collection from the past or charge off, and that company sells that debt to a new third-party collection agency. Well, guess what? That new company buys and opens a new collection on that old debt. FICO looks at the date the collection agency purchased it, bringing it back to the front, right? So it should be having minimal difference on her score. They sold it, brought it back to the front. Well, guess what? So many times we'll see that debt even get older and that collection agency sells it off to another. Isn't that crazy? There's no reason why so many people stay stuck. Now, a lot of your newer algorithms, your newer FICO models do not do that. Now, you've heard this, paying off an old bad debt can hurt your credit score. And if you haven't heard that, that seems ridiculous. But listen, in many cases, there's exceptions to the rule, that's exactly what happens. Because if you pay off this old bad debt in the past, well, guess what? The coding never changes. It doesn't matter that it's a zero. The date of last activity does, tricking the algorithm thinking that it happened sooner than it actually happened. And guess what? Bringing it back to the front and dropping the credit score, otherwise seeming like a reasonable thing to do. And then we're going to find out, as you'll see on other videos, is that there's some derogatory that tend to stay in the front and they never move back. So again, no wonder so many people stay stuck. Now, why do I say tunnel vision? Because imagine if you're FICO looking at all that credit information from a perspective of when, it's going to be like staring down a tube, right? If you have something in the front here, you're going to have a hard time seeing past it. It's no different with the FICO algorithm. So you see credit repair companies, or we'll get clients all the time, well, this credit repair, they got this removed and they got that removed. That's great. But if you don't get these removed in the front, it's like FICO doesn't see it. So guess what? The score hardly moves, or at least the lender score doesn't. We have to identify what's here up front, get these items taken care of strategically, whether that's credit repair, strategic type of settlements, before we ever see the benefit of any of this stuff from coming off as well. Now, don't get me wrong, we want this old stuff to come off as well. But the most important thing is the credit score, and it's not going to move on the history side of this if we don't take care of these items up front. So important. Hope that blesses you.